The Harfest play is probably one of the more overlooked moments of Night in the Woods. Situated in the game's narrative center, the play provides some backstory on the town of Possum Springs and serves as a slow introduction to some of the more supernatural elements of the plot that follow. Its mention of witches, curses, and the forest god all get us primed for the appearance of Ide, who May initially believes to be a ghost, which happens just moments later. Naturally, the arrival of the cult's most well-known member steals all of the attention from the play's brief detour into Deep Hollow County history. But your friendly neighborhood albatross isn't one to leave stones unturned. And after watching the play quite a few times and cross-referencing it with some of the discoveries we've already made here on this channel, I'm starting to think that this local legend is more important than we ever realized. Because hidden within the Harfest play, I believe we can find the answers to so many of our questions, from the origins of the Glimmer to the history of the Black Goat itself. But before I go on, if you are a Night in the Woods fan, then please be sure to like, subscribe, and consider supporting me with a YouTube channel membership or over on Patreon. My dream is to make these videos full-time someday, and by doing any of those things, you'll be helping make that dream a reality. Let's start by discussing the events leading up to the play. After having some Halloween fun at Harfest, May enters the old pickaxe to check in on B. It's worth noting that May doesn't actually need to do any of these activities. You can just go right to the pickaxe if you're in a rush, as I often do for some of my footage playthroughs. In fact, in the original version of the game, there wasn't anything to do at Harfest except watch the parade and go to the play. At some point down the line, I will absolutely be doing a comparison of the Weird Autumn edition and the original version of the game, so be sure to stay tuned for that. In any case, May's well aware that the Pickaxes agreed to host the annual Harfest play that evening. A bit of a strange place for an event like this if you ask me, but it's brilliant use of assets by the development team, as the store's counter serves as a perfect substitute for a stage. When May arrives, B's in a bit of a pickle, as several actors, including the one who was supposed to play the all-important witch, have dropped out of the production. But conveniently, May is dressed as a witch, so B enlists her to step into the role. I love the way this segment plays out. It has such a sitcom feel to it, from how May's costume is perfect for what B needs, to the way B volunteers her for the part, and May's belief that she can just go ahead and wing it because she's seen the play so many times over the years. B also comments on how much of the play is, in fact, actual history. According to her, it's been rewritten multiple times in the last few years to make it spookier, one of the major reasons she doesn't want May to just wing it, to the point where it's now about 20% history and 80% spooky stuff. She describes it as the quote, bad remake that doesn't respect the source material and implies that it starts off as it should before taking an unexpected turn. Now, with all of that in mind, let's dive into the play itself. It tells the story of two brothers, John and Stephen, who arrive in a then unsettled Possum Springs back in 1793. They're trappers and are carrying exactly 300 beaver pelts, as the text reminds us, about 100 times. The brothers spot a fresh spring of water and are about to drink from it when they encounter a mysterious witch. Stephen is terrified of her, but John is undeterred. And though the witch vows to curse them, the brothers ultimately ignore her threats and make camp beside the spring. But the witch did not curse in vain, and ultimately both brothers, along with the random traveler played by Greg, die. But it's important to note that according to the correct lines of the play, it was not the brothers themselves, but the water from the spring that the witch cursed. After both brothers make a ghostly appearance, the forest god, played by everyone's favorite janitor, shows up to banish the witch to, quote, wander the night through the strange places. And so ends the origin story of Possum Springs. But which parts of this tale are true, and which are fiction? Well, in order to get to the bottom of that, I think it's important to consider why people tell these types of stories. The Harfest play is a local legend, and legends, at their core, have always been about the author's attempt to understand the world around them, to explain the unexplainable. So the question is, what exactly were the original authors of this myth trying to explain? As I see it, there is only one possibility: the poisoned spring water. There might not have been ghosts, there might not have been a witch, and the forest god probably didn't swoop in to save the day. At least, not directly. But we know for certain that the spring found by the brothers was indeed poisoned. We know this because it's confirmed by the cult's unnamed leader during their second and final confrontation with May. He says that the mine that the black goat resides in was abandoned long before they were born because it was too close to water, specifically the poisoned water spring that was discovered by the first people to settle in the area, the same spring at the center of the Harfest play. So I think it's safe to say that the purpose of the Harfest play was to explain the poisoned water spring found by Jaen and Steven when they arrived in the region. In all likelihood, this story has been told in some form for generations, first as a warning against drinking from that particular spring, and later as a means of giving purpose to this piece of local history. But as it turns out, the people of Possum Springs might not have needed a story after all. Because all along, it seems that there was, indeed, something nefarious lurking in that poisoned spring water. Let's take a look back at the words of the unnamed cult leader again. The mine isn't just close to the poisoned water, the hole where the black goat resides is right underneath the notorious spring itself. Folks, this is no coincidence. Surely, there must be a link between the poisoned spring water and the black goat. The Harfest play, as ahistorical as it is, might have been onto something. A broken clock is right twice a day, as they say. I suspect that it was not a witch that cursed the spring and tainted its waters, but the black goat all along. The game doesn't just tell us this either. It shows us that there's a connection between the black goat and the water at the end of the game. After the mine caves in, when May and her friends are trying to find their way back above ground, they stumble upon a cavern with a small body of water. May ends up falling into that water, and it's then that she has her climactic showdown with the black goat. There's no doubt in my mind that this water is all that remains of the poisoned spring found by the first settlers of Possum Springs, meaning that the well May climbs out of is probably not far at all from the events of where the play took place. All of this adds to the significance of the finale, providing a cosmic and historic weight to May's struggle, just as I argued in my video about May's grandfather. It's not simply a personal battle against mental illness, one laden with metaphor, but a conflict generations in the making. But why would the black goat poison the water? Well, it might not have been intentional. Proximity alone might have done the trick. Or it might have been the black goat's way of feeding before the cult came around. As an eldritch being, it doesn't necessarily even need to have a reason. Eldritch beings do what they do for purposes beyond our comprehension. This, of course, implies that the black goat has been in Possum Springs for a long time, possibly even forever. Remember, these things have existed for eons, and they aren't exactly known for taking vacations or shopping for new domains. So, if we can trace the poisoned spring water back to the black goat, then what about the fact that the water dried up? Another detail mentioned by the unnamed cult leader. Well, as shown by the state of the cavern at the end of the game, the scarce amount of water in it, and the fact that May is able to climb out of the well to safety, it's clear that he is indeed telling the truth. The water did dry up. For the most part, anyway. There's still enough for May to fall into and have her showdown with the black goat, so not all of the poisoned water is gone. Well, to explain what happened here, I think it's best to turn to the legend of Eibon the Singer. In my video on the black goat, I theorized that Eibon the Singer, one of the constellations shown in the supplemental game Lost Constellation, is the black goat's true name. According to legend, Eibon drank the ocean to make the fish cry, so he could finally hear their voices and teach them to sing. Perhaps Eibon the black goat drank, or in this case, dried up, the water so he could teach something to the people of Possum Springs. And by that, I mean the Glimmer. I've gotten a lot of questions about the origins of the Glimmer over the past few months, and I really think it has everything to do with the poisoned water. There's obviously some power to it, as evidenced by what happens when May falls into it. I believe that after the black goat dried up the water, it ceased to be poisoned, and instead became laden with eldritch energies, imparting anyone who drank from it with the Glimmer. This would easily explain why Germ's grandmother has the Glimmer. The well is literally in her backyard, so it's not hard to imagine some of it accidentally working its way into the water supply at her home. Or perhaps she was just as much of a rebel as her grandson and his friends in her youth, explored the well one day, and drank from the water on her own. Maybe one of her pals even dared her to do so. The latter sounds pretty likely to me, and honestly, all of this has me dreaming of a Night in the Woods prequel game. But what about May? How did her family come into contact with the water and acquire the Glimmer? Well, circling back to the theories I proposed in my video on her grandfather once more, I believe that the first Borowski to have the Glimmer was her great-great-grandfather, Arthur. Based on the timeline of events detailed in the newspaper articles found in the library, I suspect that he was a founding member of the Tooth Society and passed down his tooth to May's grandfather, which is how it ends up in her possession during the events of the game. But what if Arthur's connection to the miners' strike run deeper than we ever suspected? According to the newspaper articles, the incident that touched off the miners' strike was an explosion that claimed the lives of 20 workers, a number that would rise to 122 by the time all of the bodies were finally found. The initial article on the explosion states that only 3 survivors were pulled out alive. What if Arthur was one of those 3 men? What if, before he was rescued, he fell into or was forced to drink from the Black Goat's tainted eldritch water? He might have been down there for a long time and had no choice but to drink it to stay alive. It would explain not only how he acquired the Glimmer, but why he stepped up to become a leader in both the Workers' Union and the Tooth Society. He would have experienced the horrors of the unsafe working conditions his bosses were putting him and his fellow miners through firsthand, and had more of a reason than anyone to do some crimes in the name of social justice. So, to summarize, I believe that while the Harfest play is, indeed, as B puts it, a bad remake that doesn't respect the source material, it is right about one thing. The water was indeed poisoned by something nefarious. But it wasn't a witch, it was the Black Goat. At some point, the Black Goat, in line with the legends about its true identity as Ibon the Singer, dried up the water and replaced its poison with a gift. The Glimmer. A gift that Germ's grandmother probably acquired by drinking from the well water during her youth, and that May's ancestor Arthur stumbled upon when he was trapped underground during the tragedy at Stafford Mine. This interpretation, in my view, adds so much significance to the endgame events of Night in the Woods. It takes the supernatural elements of the plot and enriches them with the history of the town, from its founding to the miners' strike and the legacies of the Wharton and Borowski families. It's not a conflict that comes out of nowhere. It's a generational struggle that has its roots dating back hundreds of years. But if you thought we were done unraveling the mysteries of Night in the Woods, stay tuned, because we're just getting started. We've got 2 more videos in my cult series to go, including one that's probably been on your mind since you first played the game. So be sure to join me next month as we explore the mystery behind the game's inciting incident, the discovery of the severed arm. Thanks for watching. As I've said in the lead up to this video, this is by far my most complicated theory yet. There's a lot here, but I feel strongly that all of it checks out and conforms with so much of what we've already pieced together here on this channel. But as I always say, I'm just a guy making YouTube videos in his man cave, so be sure to let me know what you think of this one down in the comments section. Huge shout out to all my silver and gold tier channel members, including James Pruitt, Raven Lampkin, and Corey Matson, who get early access to these videos thanks to donations of $5 to $10 a month. Big thanks to Jordi, Jaen, Moreno, and Wolf.Godwin for providing me with my channel art and the music for these videos. Next week, I'll be taking a look at one of the most interesting characters from Disco Elysium, Colossia. See you guys then.